I'm Sheila Warren. I am the head of blockchain and distributed ledger technology at the World Economic Forum, based in San Francisco. So blockchain's been a priority for a little while at the forum, but really in the context of fourth industrial revolution technologies like AI, precision medicine, etc. So our founder published a book a couple of years ago talking about the fourth industrial revolution and thinking through how these technologies have the potential to really upend society, and that could be really, really great, or it could be really, really bad. So the idea for the center came up then, and we opened last summer. So I really felt like the forum, or the center specifically, would be a place for me to make a lot of impact because of the community that the forum's been able to convene over the course of time. My background is in law and civic technology, nonprofit tech, and so I confess I brought a healthy degree of skepticism to the idea that an organization I knew primarily for Davos would be able to achieve impact at the broad scale. But through conversations with both the founder and senior leadership, I really became convinced that they were quite serious. They really understood the dangers of these technologies, and they were quite committed to an inclusion model that embedded ethics and values in the policies being generated to support the adoption of these technologies. And that's been proven to be true. So I think all of us in this space have this moment where we wake up at 2 a.m. and we think, oh my God, this is the use case, and you realize you're just addicted to the technology. For me, that moment was, I think, a lot about racial justice and criminal justice, especially in the United States, in the context of interactions with police, redlining, etc. So for me, an exciting application is the idea of applying chain or ledger to the chain of custody of evidence in criminal cases. This could be everything from rape kits on chain, or DNA evidence, or even just physical evidence that would in some way help alleviate some of the financial burden that's placed on defendants in the system, speed up trials, enable the right to speedy trial that our Constitution allows. So I am supporting some research on the Constitution to see if this kind of deployment would be constitutional in the United States, and I think it has the potential to really transform how we think about criminal justice and how we really define justice. In terms of protocol development, I think it's frankly less critical what I think is going to happen and more what the consequences are of what happens. So I think worst case scenario, you get proliferation of protocol and 1,000 flowers bloom with interoperability among them. That could be good or bad. It can lead to drag in a system. It can lead to potential centralization that could be problematic and sort of undermine the potential of the technology. But do I think that there'll be one protocol that rules them all? I feel like that's probably unlikely, but I also think there's going to be a lot of failure in this space and experimentation, so we are going to get convergence at some point, probably to a handful. I think one of the biggest stumbling blocks to effective deployment or inclusive deployment of blockchain, frankly, is knowledge. It's just the sheer lack of knowledge in this space by people in positions of power. It's a misunderstanding about what the technology could be used for, a misunderstanding about what the technology actually is, the equation of it with digital currency. All these things are things that I would love to see just vanish immediately. I think traditional media has been to varying degrees helpful and also very unhelpful about this space. Now, one thing I appreciate is that we're seeing a lot of outlets calling out the general lack of inclusion and diversity in this space. That's helpful because it's true and it helps us do better and think better and be more cognizant of our own biases and perspectives. Where I think that there has not been help is all of the hype around Bitcoin and digital currency and all of that, and the obsessive rabid tracking of where Bitcoin is or isn't and all this kind of thing. I don't find that very useful. I certainly see why it happens, but I think it distracts from the technology, which to me is should be the main show. I do think that the misunderstandings are pretty universal. I think that people are all people and they get their information from somewhat the same places. So while I think that there's more access to knowledge on the part of a CEO of a large corporation, for example, they have to be motivated to explore the technology. And if all they hear about is digital currency and ICOs and this kind of thing, they're less likely, I would argue, to explore the actual foundational technology and what it can do. There's so many interesting people and technologies in this space. I tend to get really excited about people that are focusing on either like infrastructure problems. I really love right mesh networks. I think they're doing some really interesting work, and thinking about the question I was asked during my talk was, how do we address the issues of connectivity in this space? Like, there's a fundamental need for connectivity to be included in the community, and I think that right mesh is a group focusing on that problem in ways that are exciting. I love Everledger's model and Leanne. I think that they're doing really tremendous work and being very inclusive and intentional about who they bring into the project. So that entire team is very focused on civil society, on engaging with workers in mind, and not just kind of making a lot of assumptions about the way that their lives actually work, and thinking about embedding that in their protocol. So I really appreciate that. I really love Ethereal. I do think that part of the goal of Ethereal is the creation of a community, and I feel that the design details they put into the conference really facilitate that. It's a relatively more casual conference in terms of style and approach. I think they focus on things like the creation of community. They do an excellent job of highlighting diverse speakers in the space who have a lot of deep knowledge. So to kind of eradicate the idea that there's any sort of tokenism happening in sort of the selection of speakers, they do an excellent job with that. And it's always just like a fun time, which I think is important. We should all also be enjoying ourselves too. That's not a bad thing.